Hi guys, and welcome to my full review of the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge Plus. You can see the specs on the site, and on paper this device is a total beast. Besides maybe the battery that I thought is a little bit small, but I will talk about that later. We also have the beautiful Samsung Super AMOLED display, the octa-core and all that, but let's not waste any more time and just go into the full review and start with the design and build quality. Quick size comparison with a 5.2 inch. As you can see, it is a little bit taller. It is also a little bit wider, even though this little makes quite a difference in terms of one-hand usability. But I have to admit, it is a very compact phablet because it almost could be used with one hand, and if you have a little bit longer than my short meaty fingers, then you could actually pull it off, because what I did, I often, when I wanted to swipe here, did already trigger something here on the side. But I have to admit, that's more of my issue. It is very narrow. It is a little bit top heavy though, since it is still quite tall, therefore very thin as well. It is built very premium. There are no complaints about the build quality. It feels very solid. The weight is pretty much perfectly balanced, because it's not too lightweight to feel cheap, but also not too heavy to be a quite burden in your pocket or something like that. The glass is something that you have to decide for yourself. Personally, I like glass on glass because for me it's grippy, but a lot of people think different here. On the back we can see the fingerprint, the heart rate sensor, and a few other things like the flash, the camera. On the top we can see the SIM card tray, the microphone. On the left side there is the volume rocker, and on the right side there is the power button. I will talk about those in a second. On the bottom we can see the headphone jack, another microphone, micro USB, and the speaker. About those buttons, I think the power button is placed a little bit too high, because I usually want to pick it up like this. I have to inconvenience stretch a little bit. It's not by a lot, but it makes a little bit of an inconvenience factor. But the volume rocker is something that I can't get at all, because I don't know, because on the Samsung Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge Plus it worked because the whole device was smaller, and what they did is just in terms of ratio put it higher. I would have wished for it if be somewhere there, but actually I would prefer it on the right side, but that's also personal preference. The button itself though, very clicky and very tactile. They work really well. Personally, I think the power button still sounds a little bit cheap because of those clicky things, and the capacitive buttons is always a matter of taste, because either you like them or not. I have no issues with capacitive buttons, but I don't like the physical home button, because you have to actually press it in use, which is something that I don't prefer so much. We have a fingerprint reader, and it did work out quite okay, but a lot of times it worked when I just pulled it out of my pocket and wanted to hit it like this to get it unlocked. It didn't work, and it wasn't satisfying enough for me not to disable it, so I did that. But other than that, I have to say overall it is really amazingly built. And the edge is something that I will talk about a little bit later in the display part, because I still think it's a gimmick. I still don't see any usefulness out of it. It makes the device feel a little bit wider than, for example, the S6 was compared to the S6 Edge Plus. And I mean the S6 Edge, and I think the same will be the case for the Note 5 and S6 Edge Plus once again. If I would have to choose between those two, I would definitely choose the Note 5, but in Europe that's not available yet. But it's pretty much the same device, so I would go for the Note 5. Let's go into the display now. We have a 5.7 inch device with a resolution of 2560 by 1440. So the resolution is amazing. It is super sharp, and there are no issues here. The white levels I would wish to be a little bit colder, but that's really a minor thing, and if you don't use a more colder device all the time side by side, you shouldn't worry about that. The blacks, as you can see here, are super deep. Contrast ratio is amazing, so there are no doubts that this is, in my opinion, the best available display on the market. Colors are very vibrant, very punchy and vivid, even though they are slightly oversaturated, but I definitely prefer that. And as you can see here, the viewing angles are also super stable, because it always, especially here on the lock screen or on the home screen, looks like it would be some kind of sticker. Absolutely amazing display. Also very bright. Sunlight readability was great. No complaints here at all about this display. It could just be a little bit colder, but other than that, absolutely fantastic. The one thing that I have a little bit of an issue though are, due to the curve And usually what I see on Super AMOLED displays as well is touch responsiveness towards the sides, because I usually use bezel gestures, and as you can see I have a hard time getting them launched here, because as you can see it does work out okay sometimes. You really have to figure it out. It does work, and if you only do side swipes and all that works, but if you do upwards and downwards, I had my issues, and for me that's a little bit of an issue, but I think no one else should have an issue with that. Okay, so let's get into the sound and see what we've got here. So I think the first thing that is obvious while playing or something like that, or just holding it in landscape mode, I did block the speaker quite often. That's a little bit of an unfortunate placement, but not the end of the world. About the sound itself though, for me it personally feels a little bit less loud than the S6 did. For some reason it's still loud enough, no issues here at all. Gets a good experience, but I think the S6 Edge sound, I mean the S6 and S6 Edge sounded just a little bit better. The sound balance is still good. There is a tiny little bit of bass, mids are nice, and the highs are very clear. So overall the sound is still good. The placement isn't the best, but for what it is, it gets the job done just nicely. So let's get into the performance here and check the browser first. Scrolling is absolutely flawless, as you can see here, extremely buttery smooth. Yes, and of course now we have an issue, because I was actually running Riptide in the background and wanted to see if it will stay in the RAM to show it later off, and as you can see it didn't. But as you can see, scrolling absolutely perfect. Let's go into Phoenix. Same goes here as well. This is pretty much the smoothest experience I've ever had. Absolutely responsive here, no problems. If we go into Palabra as well, it did reload, as you can see here. Even though we have 4 GB of RAM, it still does kick out apps a little bit more often than it should actually, because for me it feels like a device with somewhere between 2 and 3 GB of RAM if you have a more normal RAM management. But once the app is loaded, which it does really fast, the experience is great. It's just multitasking that still isn't up on par with the best ones out there. For example, the Sony Xperia Z3 with 3 GB of RAM can hold up more device. So the RAM management is still a little bit more aggressive, but this is something that I never really bother about in normal use, because the apps, if they have to reload, just do it very quickly. So don't really worry about multitasking. The multitasking still works fine. Yes, it's maybe not what you would expect from a 4 GB device, but it's definitely not bad. As for the gaming performance, and this is something where this device knows to shine, because I had pretty much the highest frame rates I've ever seen on any device. As you can see here, extremely buttery smooth, almost never any slowdowns. So if you want to play a lot of games, more high-end games, this is definitely the device to go for, because super high frame rates, super smooth. It didn't really get hot or anything like that, so no problems at all. Of course the device will heat up, but that's the case for every other device. As you can see here, there are a few rare instances of lag or slowdowns, but definitely still overall it is the best performer I've had so far. Smoothest experience. The multitasking maybe not the very best. As you can see here, it did have to reload once again. Or if you go into Phoenix back, there is quite a few reloads there, but something you shouldn't bother if you don't maybe rely on heavy multitasking. But overall I would say it is pretty much the best performer out there still. If we go into the battery life, and let me quickly get my values here for the charging. 30 minutes gets you to 60%, 60 minutes gets you to 93%, and after 80 minutes you are at 100% thanks to Quick Charge 2.0. The one thing that has to be mentioned, even if you use something like a smart charger that doesn't really take use of Quick Charge, I still needed just maybe like 20 minutes more for a full charge, and this is still great. If you take a look at the values here, as you can see, 18 hours, 4.5 hours of screen on time, 5 hours slightly over, and 20. Here we have the Geekbench scores if you care for that, but that's not really important. As you can see, we have these values here. We have 34,000, We have 67,000. Not that I really care, but I just did the screenshots. But back to the battery life, about 5 hours with 1 day of use, 2 hours with 50%. So the values are really top notch. 4 hours was with heavy use over the course of 1 day. And here once again 4.5 hours. I did also a YouTube test. 1 hour of YouTube needs about 11 to 12% with a brightness of 45%, and this makes it one of the most efficient video playback devices, because I every time notice that whenever I watch a video, the drain here is pretty much the best you can get. So I'm really happy. Standby drain was at about 0.5% if you take right use of the auto sync, so quite okay. So as you can see, 4.5 is what I would say a solid minimum. I would guess though you can get easily 5 hours or more if you maybe turn down the brightness. 45% for me at all times was fine enough, no problems here. So I would say it is good enough for a 2-day battery life with moderate use. If you go into the software, just real quick, I'm already using a different theme. I think it is called Vio. And I really like the look of it because, as you can see here, black with blue. If you go into the settings, it also looks very, very minimalistic and elegant. So as you can see already, we have the themes engine, and with the right theme, for example, I like this one. I don't have any issues with the UI of TouchWiz anymore, because yes, the drawer is there, you have all the functionality. I would end up using Nova anyways, but it gets the job done. Software is fine. Not really, okay, there are a few bloat apps still, but the gimmicky features have been tuned down very much. You have only the really useful stuff. We also have still dual screen. You have that. You also have, if you go for example here, you have small windowed apps, if it would have worked, which of course now, okay, this app doesn't work. Let's try it in Chrome. So as you can see, not all the apps work. And if you see this actually happening, this is because of my gesture. So as you can see, we have this as well. It works with most of the apps, but still not with all the apps. So that's a little bit of a bummer. I would wish for a little bit more support here for more apps. But other than that, I don't really have anything to add. This software does a nice job. It doesn't seem to burden the device anymore. It feels way more lightweight. It looks way better. So it is pretty much the best iteration of TouchWiz ever. To get about the battery, I'm not even gonna talk about it. I think it is one of the top 3 cameras. If you want to know a little bit more, just check here this review from Some Gadget Guy. He makes the best camera reviews, and with his review being out there, there's just no need for me to say anything. I can only tell you the camera is great, very sharp, great autofocus, amazing picture qualities in low light but also in bright light. So nothing more to add here. So let's get to the recap. I know there's not a whole lot that I can tell you now that others already didn't in their reviews, but still, here's my take. In terms of design and build quality, it has been done really, really nice. It feels premium, it feels actually quite compact for a phablet. I'm still not the biggest fan of the curve because of the reflections towards the curve and the slight distortion, but I have to admit it looks beautiful. So in terms of design, they did a brilliant job. As for the display, it is second to none. The qualities are just unmatched. It looks very bright, very vivid, brilliant, pitch blacks, super sharp, no complaints here at all. The only thing that I had a little bit of a personal issue is the responsiveness towards the side and activating my bezel gesture, but that's just my personal issue. The sound was really, really good, even though just on the bottom. And I know a lot of people complain here, but it was very loud, it sounded very good, and only while playing games I had to check a little bit how I held my hands, not to block it, but overall more than satisfying at all times. One thing that is a lot better than just satisfying at all times is the performance, because it is pretty much the best performance I've had so far. Super smooth, super fast, very consistent. The only thing, the multitasking was a little bit limited, but if you don't use it as I did in my detail part and launch a lot of apps, switch between them all the times, you won't really notice, because if you like switch your apps every few minutes, you won't really notice the reload that much. For me it wasn't an issue, but I did notice the limitation and the quite hard RAM management, but never to the extent that I bothered about it. Gaming performance though was absolutely brilliant, smoothest frame rate so far, almost no slowdowns, so absolutely great job here. And the next part is where I have to admit defeat, because I did bash the battery with only 3000 milliamp hours of battery, and in my video I said it can't work out, but I also said if it turns out to be the other case, I will say it, and I do it by now, because the battery life is absolutely pleasing, absolutely satisfying. I got solid 4.5 hours, if not 5 hours, and I think most people, even with a little bit of lighter use or watching more videos, could get easily 5.5, if not even 6 hours out of it. So it is pretty much almost even a 2-day device. I could personally get away with 2 days out of use, but even on one very heavy day, no problems here. So I was definitely wrong saying it won't work. It does work. In terms of software, I'm very fine. Using a nice theme, it worked out quite nice. The features were all there. The fingerprint reader maybe isn't my first choice because it just didn't work out as I wanted it at work, because I have a little bit oily hands there. But that's a personal thing. In most cases, if you do it correctly, it does work. But if you just want to do it not really thinking about it, it just didn't work out the best for me. But I still like TouchWiz this time. It feels very lightweight, not that in your face anymore. There's still a lot of bloat installed and you can't uninstall all of them, just deactivate them, but it didn't bother me at all. So software is the best iteration of TouchWiz so far I had, and the camera is amazing, top 3 easily. Great results, so I'm not going to talk much about that. Once again, you can check some Gadget Guy's review of that. So what's my personal opinion? Would I get it? And here, not to sound like an ass, no, I wouldn't consider it for 1 second, but that's a personal thing. I don't like the edge. If then I would get the Note. I just don't like the reflections. I don't like the distortion. I don't like the missed chance to make it feel better in the hand, because if I would just switch it the other way around, it feels so much better because the curve on the back makes more sense for me. But I have to agree, it looks a lot more stylish. And if you don't have the need the best feel in hand and want a nicer looking device, because everyone who saw this device holding me in the hand said let me check it, and everyone said it looks amazing, and if that's your priority over the feel in the hand, I don't have an issue with that. And if not, you can just get the Note 5, because in terms of specs and everything else besides the S Pen, they are pretty much the same. Also, why I don't like it so much, my bezel gestures that I rely personally on didn't work out so well. But as you can already see, this is nitpicking on a crazy high level. And it's also a little bit too big for me personally. I would prefer it to be in the S6 Edge region in terms of size, but still with the great battery life. And it also was a lot, maybe at least if the S6 Edge or S6 didn't get any updates that I don't know of, the performance is better. I guess the S6 did catch up now and performs now, but this performed way more consistent than the S6 and S6 Edge. Battery life was a lot better. I don't know how they squeezed the battery life that good out of it. So it's definitely a personal choice that I don't like it, but I can see why, and I could definitely recommend it if you consider all the things that I said that maybe aren't perfect. But I really liked the experience. It was great. And I would say it is one of the best possible devices to buy outright now, but it's just maybe not the best device for everyone. And there's one thing that I have to mention afterwards. I see a lot of people complaining after maybe 2-3 weeks or maybe 1 month or 2 months on Samsung devices that they, after that period, start to lag a lot, performance gets bad, the battery life gets bad. I can't say anything about that since I haven't used a Samsung device for that long. But just keep that in mind, maybe it could get worse. But from my 2 weeks of using it, I didn't experience any of that. And the experience overall was great. But just keep it in mind, that's it for my review of the S6 Edge Plus. If you have anything to say or ask in the comments down below. If you like this review, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, I guess you know what to do. Otherwise, please reshare, it would help my discoverability. And other than that, I wish you a nice day. Until next time, bye.